another huge fight that was announced recently. There's actually two I'd like to discuss on this podcast. One is a fight that we have been talking about for months, a fight which I had addressed with Frank and George Hickman, the Hickman brothers. If you haven't listened to my interviews with them, definitely go out of your way to check those out. Long interviews, a little bit over an hour, but very, very good conversations. A really good insight into Syndicate MMA, a good insight into what the Ultimate Fighter House is like with Frank Hickman, obviously on the team of Alexander Volkanovski. And then you've got George Hickman, who went into a little bit about how he became the head coach at Tiger Muay Thai and how he was originally going to be an MMA fighter and had some fights there, but then just transitioned into the coaching role and taking over the gym after Roger Huerta had, stepped away. So those were some very good interviews, but I had mentioned on both of those how I wanted to see Riddell and Fiziev go at it. Brad Riddell and Rafael Fiziev, who is ranked, I believe Riddell's ranked 12, Fiziev's ranked 13 at 155 pounds. And they're a fight that I really wanted to see, but obviously it's tough when two guys have trained together. They have extensive training history together at Tiger Muay Thai. And, it's always hard when fighters who train together end up having to fight each other. Usually that's something that they like to avoid in professional mixed martial arts. Obviously not if they have rivalries, but if they're in good standing and they're good friends and close, it's always something you really don't want to see because it's hard for them to, want to get the win over a former teammate who they have history with, who they probably have, shared laughs with and stories with and endless rounds with and just gotten really close to each other. So it's always hard to, have to go against a guy who you have an extensive training history with. And when you're so close in the rankings, it's something I think the UFC could have held off for a little bit. Maybe you could have given them each another fight. Maybe you could have done Gillespie versus Riddell, and you could have done Fiziev versus Arman Sarukian, because I think Sarukian has a fight coming up against Dan Hooker. So if he were to get past that fight, then maybe you could have done Fiziev versus Sarukian or Fiziev versus Hooker. Like I said, depending on how those fights would play out. But it's a fight I'm excited for just based off of pure striking and the technical prowess of each fighter going up against each other. I mean, Fiziev versus Riddell is going to be the highest level kickboxing match that you ever see in the UFC octagon. 100%. Fiziev is one of the most technical and explosive kickboxers. He had a tough fight against Bobby Green. He seems to fade off as the fight goes longer when it goes past the midway point of the second round and into the third round. But beautiful left switch kick, beautiful left hook, beautiful combinations and ending with kicks. 1, 2, 3, hook to the body, low kick, body kick, step back, body kick, switch kick, right hand, left hook, body kick, constant combinations and huge power from Fiziev. But Riddell is a guy who we've seen be able to, come back from adversity, getting dropped by Drew Dober and then coming back to rock him with a right hand, left hook. I believe it was a 1-2, and then he followed up with a left hook and rocked him. Hurt him a few times, got some good takedowns in wrestling against Drew Dober. I don't know why that name escaped me when I just talked about it, but a really, really solid fight. In my opinion, I think that Riddell is the more well-rounded fighter when it comes to the grappling and top control and just being able to outwork people on the ground. I think you saw that in the Drew Dober fight as he was able to get a lot of takedowns and work from that top position. And I think that Fiziev on the feet is dangerous. Both of these guys are neck and neck when it comes to ability and the kickboxing on the feet. But I think that Riddell can use his grappling to open up some opportunities for him and open up some counters as Fiziev tries to step in. But I do expect the wrestling and clinch work of Riddell to probably take over the later the fight goes. Once it hits that 8-minute, 9-minute mark in the second round, going into the third round, I think that Riddell will take over. And I'm leaning towards Brad Riddell to get a late finish in that third round. But man, the first round is going to be one of the closest rounds between each fighter that you ever see. So definitely look out for this first round because either guy can get the knockout. Riddell can catch Fiziev and hurt him, or Fiziev can land a brutal combination and land on the chin of Riddell and hurt him as well. So it's going to be anybody's fight when it comes to the first two rounds. But as it goes longer, I do expect Riddell to take over with his pace, pressure, and the ability to use his grappling and wrestling. That's something that is very, very prevalent out of the city kickboxing guys. A lot of them come into these fights known as really decorated strikers and kickboxers and Muay Thai practitioners, but you see their ability to defend takedowns and shoot takedowns and sprawl and counter takedown attempts with takedowns of their own. And I think that we're going to see that from Riddell in that fight. That takes place in December. I believe it's going to be December 5th. I'm not 100% sure it's either the 5th or the 11th. Somewhere in December, that is going to take place on a UFC fight night. So definitely look out for that. Another fight that's going to go down is a battle between undefeated UFC welterweight prospect and Sean Brady, who comes into the fight with 14 victories and no defeats, going up against the number 9 ranked welterweight, coming off of a loss to Vicente Luque at UFC 265. In Michael the Maverick Chiesa. And wow, what a fight. And I just want to say before I break it down really quick that kudos to Michael Chiesa for taking this fight against Brady, because this is a fight where this is not an easy fight for him. Nothing in this fight is going to come easy. I think that Brady is a better striker on the feet. I think he has beautiful boxing. His defense is kind of lacking, if you do put the pace and pressure on him with the hands like we saw against Jake Matthews and we saw early on against Court McGee. If you come forward and land some combinations before Brady can really set into a rhythm and get into the fight, he does leave his chin open and his chin exposed. Chiesa has a beautiful straight left, good 1-2s from that southpaw position, and he's very good with his lateral movement around the cage. He's got a big, tall frame for 170. It makes you question just how this guy was able to make 155 pounds, but his ability to use lateral movement and, use those poking and prodding strikes, a jab, a cross, faking, throwing a hook, throwing a front kick, throwing some round kicks to keep the opponent off of them, and then when they come in, he'll go to a body lock. He'll shoot a double, go to a body lock, try to get trips in the body lock position, work takedowns up against the cage. That's where he has his most success. I think that on the feet, it's dangerous for him against a guy like Sean Brady. Brady's a guy who I talked about heavily after he got that mounted guillotine finish in the second round against Christian Aguilera. If you go back and listen to one of my podcast episodes, I actually titled it The Brady Show. And he's a very, very big, thick, strong welterweight. He's not so big in terms of his height, but he's built like a brick shithouse. I think that Paul Felder said that he had petitioned to get him to have the nickname Brick House, Sean the Brick House Brady. But he obviously doesn't have a nickname right now. But Brady undefeated in the UFC. I believe he is 4-0. He has wins over Court McGee. He's got a win over Christian Aguilera. He's got a win just recently via submission over Jake Matthews. That was at UFC 259. He was able to catch him in that arm triangle choke from the top position. So he's a tough kid. This is definitely going to be his hardest matchup to date. He is a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He trains under the Gracies in Philly. I think it's Gracie Baja in Philly and another gym. And then I know he gets some work in with Paul Felder. And Felder himself has said that Brady is one of the strongest people that he's ever trained with. Or I think he said he is the strongest. Pound for pound, the strongest fighter he's ever trained with. And I think that his strength and his top pressure in the grappling is going to give Chiesa a lot of problems. I think that Chiesa can cause Brady some issues in terms of trying to get a hold of him because he's a lot longer and more rangy than Sean Brady. So he's going to want to keep him at range, use those jabs, use those front kicks, use those crosses, use that lateral movement so Brady can't get a hold of him. Once it gets to the ground, it's going to be hard for Brady to find those openings from the top position because of how long and lanky Michael Chiesa is. He's going to probably be able to, get out of a lot of positions that some fighters would not be able to get out of. But I do lean heavily towards Brady here. I think that this is a really dangerous fight for Chiesa. And I'm honestly really surprised that he took this fight after he just got submitted by Vicente Luque with that Darce choke. And a lot of people were not giving Vicente Luque's jiu-jitsu and grappling enough credit going into that fight. I believe I picked him to drop Chiesa with a shot and then lock up a submission attempt. You can go back and listen to my UFC 265 prediction so you can get, the actual prediction for that fight. But I do believe that I did pick Vicente. I might have picked him by TKO, but I did explain how don't be surprised if he gets a hold of Chiesa's neck, locks him up, and gets a submission. And I didn't hear almost anybody talking about the grappling and the Darce choke ability from that front headlock position of Vicente Luque. but he caught him circling with that left hook against the cage, scrambled out of a rear naked choke position against Chiesa, and then was able to fish the arm through underneath the neck and around the arm to lock up that bicep control and get that Darce choke and get the sub. So Chiesa has been submitted in his career. He got submitted by Anthony Pettis. He got submitted by Vicente Luque. So I do think that Brady does have the ability to lock up a submission on Chiesa or just stifle him due to his strength on the ground. I think that Brady's his strength is going to be really prevalent in this fight. But on the feet, man, his boxing is beautiful. Good 1-2s, good check left hook. He loves to use that left hook. And against the southpaw and Michael Chiesa, I expect him to go over the jab of Chiesa a lot and try to land that check left hook. But I am leaning heavily towards the newcomer, Sean Brady, to defeat Chiesa. And, kudos to Michael Chiesa for taking this fight, because, yes, it is a huge step up in competition for Brady, but it's also a very dangerous fight when you're a top 10, number 9 contender in the 170-pound division to go up against an unranked fighter in Sean Brady. I think he's ranked low, like maybe 14 or 15, but a really tough matchup, and kudos to Chiesa for taking the fight and a big step up for Sean Brady.